First, ներողություն, որ իմ հայրենը շատ լավ չէ, բայց գուզեմ ասել, որ շատ շնորհակալ եմ, որ քեզի պատմությունը պատմեցար, եւ շատ շնորհակալ եմ, որ for being here, որ հոս գլաս. Just thank you for being here and thank you for sharing your story. And I'm sorry that my Armenian isn't that good, but that was one of the most powerful, I think, moments of the conference. So thank you for inspiring us to keep acting and taking action. And now I have the great privilege to introduce the keynote speaker. Keynote closing speaker, Judith Chomsky, who is just an icon. This is not her bio, I am saying this. She is just an icon in the human rights litigation world, the human rights world in the US and around the world. And it's a real privilege and honor that she's here with us today and that she has taken so much delight in being here in Armenia and so much curiosity to the culture and to the issues. And I'm sure she has, and I know she has a really wonderful presentation for us. So let me tell you a bit about her. Judith Chomsky is an American human rights lawyer. In 1975, she became a co-founder of the Juvenile Law Center of Philadelphia. She represented migrant farm laborers and began the Workers' Rights Law Project to serve workers who were trying to organize within their labor organization to create more democratic and active unions. She was contacted by the Center for Constitutional Rights, CCR, which was looking for a lawyer who could go to Gaza and the occupied West Bank to help prepare a case involving civilian deaths from the Israeli occupation. This began her current work life as a cooperating attorney with the CCR and Earth Rights International, an environmental and human rights NGO, where she works on cases in their international human rights docket. Chomsky served as an election observer in the 1984 election in El Salvador and in the 1994 election in South Africa. In the U.S., she represented victims of the Bosnian ethnic cleansing and the Karadzic case. Further, she has represented Colombian families in a federal class action lawsuit against Chiquita Brands International, in the case Doe v. Chiquita Brands International, a producer and distributor of bananas based in Cincinnati, Ohio, for funding and arming known paramilitary terrorist organizations, designated as such by the United States Secretary of State, in Colombia to maintain its profits. Chomsky also filed a petitioner's opposition to the government's motion for clarification and reconsideration of this court's November 6, 2008 case management order and supplemental amended order with regard to the Walid Saeed bin Said Zaid case. Chomsky was one of the lawyers from the Center for Constitutional Rights who represented the Sarawiwa family in their lawsuit against Royal Dutch Shell. And on June 9th, of 2009, Shell settled out of court with the Sarawiwa family and 9 other plaintiffs for a total of $15.5 million, which included a sum towards a trust benefiting the Ogoni people. Most recently, she was part of the team that won a jury verdict against the former president of Bolivia. There's so much more to her bio, but this already is an incredible privilege and honor to have her here, and I'll just invite her up to the stage to close out our conference. Thank you, Judith.
I'm going to skip the usual formalities of thank yous and credits. I want to talk to you because the speaker before me is the person who needs to speak to the public, to a jury in the United States, because we can't say what he can say. What I do is try to bring cases that give a voice to people who have no voice, that give them a chance to tell other people what has happened to them and to have them validate his experience and his right to a redress. And I think that is what I know how to do. I don't know the kind of fancy international law that people spoke about. I can't make films, but I know how to be a lawyer, and many of you do too, and that's our job. There are other ways. I'm not minimizing them. I'm talking about what we can do in the most individual level. I did a case, I want to thank you, because it's when you speak that we work. I had a case from a little place no one here probably has heard about. Well, maybe the students have. East Timor. East Timor is a little island, or half of a little island in the Pacific. They had a referendum, and they voted to be independent of Indonesia. Indonesia responded with a vengeance. In a third of the population of East Timor was murdered because they wanted independence. They wanted self-determination. And we had a trial in the United States, and the defendant defaulted. He was a Indonesian general, much liked by the United States because he was a Christian from a Muslim nation. He didn't show up. There was never going to be a money award because we could never collect against an Indonesian general who wasn't coming to the United States. So we had the trial. People testified. One of the people who testified was a human rights worker who found his brother's body. And the psychologist who testified said how traumatizing it was. And then he got up and he testified. And he talked about how painful it was for him to tell his story. And the judge asked him, "Why are you here? Why are you doing that if it's giving you so much pain?" And he said, "Because if I don't speak and there's no record, they will win again." And that's what we don't want to happen. All right, I'm totally off topic here, but here we go. What that witness said, that plaintiff said, is something that was echoed in almost every case that I have done. That the ability to speak, the ability to tell your story, not to your neighbor who already knows it, and not to your family member, but to the public, to a jury, that is affirming, and there's something about that, even in the absence of money, that is healing. Thomas Becker, I suspect, already told you this about this case, but I think it has the echo of the same sentiment. Thomas Becker and I did it, and many other people, a team of people, did a case in Bolivia. Bolivia is a country divided by class and race. Since the emancipation from Spain, a few white people and a few indigenous supporters have dominated and controlled a land of poor and indigenous subsistence farmers. When they rose up using nonviolent means to object to his policies, he responded with lethal force. We had our first deposition. One of the people at the deposition, and I urge you to do this, was one of the victims of that violence. And he didn't want to go to a room where he could have a translator. He wanted to sit and face the richest, most powerful man in Bolivia. And when he did that, that was enough for him and for the community that he represented. That was a victory, to face down the person who had killed his wife. Thank you. Yes. At the trial in this same case, one of the people who testified was a man whose 7-year-old daughter was killed while she was in her house by a bullet from a soldier who was told, shoot at everything that moves. Oh, am I not? You should give me a lower desk here. So, at the end of his testimony, he turned to subsistence farmer, turned to the richest, most powerful man in his country and pointed at him and said, "You killed my daughter." And we did get a jury award. And hopefully he will get money. But it's not compensation. We are not able in our system to make people whole. But we are able to give them a voice. And that's, for me, that's what my job is as a lawyer, and I think it should be yours. I want to put these cases in a kind of context. I don't think legal remedies do it. I mean, we get some justice, maybe we feel better, but we need a movement, a popular struggle to get us the kind of justice that's meaningful. I had the honor to be part of a team that represented someone named Ken Saro-Wiwa. Ken Saro-Wiwa came from one of the smallest tribes in the Niger Delta in Nigeria, a hugely populous country. We're going to call it Shell Oil because they lost the Royal Dutch. Shell Oil exploited the oil in his village in the most careless manner. Oil spilled and contaminated things. If you went into the Ogoni land, the fires from the flared gas were up all night. There was a roar all night, light all night. And he took his little tribe, his little tribe, and he put what was happening to them in the television sets in Great Britain by connecting himself to a growing environmental movement. And he was so effective as an organizer that on the first Agoni Day, the first kind of national demonstration, 1/3 of the people of Agoni came. Even today, Shell has not gone back into Agoni. Now, Ken Saro-Wiwa was hung. The government of the state, the government of Nigeria, which at that time was a dictatorship, wouldn't help him, wouldn't help the Agoni people. So he had gone around them. And we alleged that Shell supported him, supported the execution of him. The Wiwa case was the first case against a multinational corporation for human rights violations. Nuremberg did not convict, condemn, do anything to the corporations. The people who were subject to Nuremberg were a few industrialists, not the company. The companies are alive and full of profits even today. When we began that case, it was so outrageous to the corporate world and to the legal community, even to our own human rights community, that people made fun of the case. The lawyer for Shell wouldn't answer my phone calls. When I wrote him, he put magic marker on my letters and sent it back. He suggested I needed a psychiatrist rather than a law degree. The case went up. We argued in the Second Circuit. When I made the argument, this is for those of you who are afraid, I didn't know the Latin words for human rights violations. I had never studied international law. But there it was. We were there and we had to do what we could do. We won the case. No, we survived, I should say. We survived a motion to dismiss. We won on appeal. It went back. And on the eve of a trial, Shell settled with Ken Saro-Wiwa and the others. They didn't settle because we were great lawyers. They settled because we had stuck out. And they settled because every day in the newspaper, as in the run-up to the trial, and in the media, Shell was connected to torture and extrajudicial killing. And that was not good for their brand. And that was our victory. A combination of people, the lawyers, the plaintiffs, the community of Agoni, and the environmental community as a whole. We need to find allies. We need to know that our legal work can't bring justice. We need to be all together, the plaintiffs and the community at large, all together, working toward a single goal. Now, we didn't know what we were doing when we started. I remind you of this because you have a long and difficult road. The very first Alien Tort Statute case, that is the first time a human rights case was tried in a domestic court, was almost a fluke. The lawyers at the Center for Constitutional Rights had thought about this 200-year-old, totally dormant statute and said, maybe we can use that to bring claims based on massacres in Vietnam. And then they thought, maybe we can use that law to challenge the baby lift. I suppose you don't know about it, but when the U.S. left Vietnam, they took thousands of Vietnamese children and put them up for adoption. So nothing happened. And then the family of a victim of torture and murder in Paraguay was sent to the Center for Constitutional Rights. And he had been tortured and killed by a police officer. I'm not talking a big, fancy general, just like in a police station. When the government was overturned in Paraguay, he came to the United States, and he was at risk of deportation when he was found. So CCR couldn't wait. If there was going to be justice in a U.S. court against him, it had to be done immediately. So they took their old research on the use of the Alien Tort Statute and they filed. And that Florida decision changed the prospects for human rights law in the United States. No single case moves the needle or moves it very far. I mean, we inch forward, we creep forward, we stumble forward because we make mistakes. But it doesn't matter because the clients, the plaintiffs, the victims move us, keep us going. It won't happen right away. It'll take a long time. And it'll take many mistakes. We don't creep forward, we kind of stumble forward. From that little beginning in Florida, the human rights docket expanded. It went from this lowly police officer to the estate of Marcos, the ex-dictator of the Philippines. And the theory changed. Not only the killer, not only the court torturer who puts his hands on the victim is liable, but the people above him, the people controlling him, they're the ones who need to be brought to justice. And that's what happened in that case. And in the next case arose out of Bosnia, the next kind of movement forward. It was against Yerevan, who some of you may know, a Serb leader in Bosnia who was responsible for many, many deaths. And what happened in that case is that the court said, not only is the hands-on person guilty, but an extended liability. And you don't need state action. That's a some human rights violations, they have to be done to the state, by the state, but some don't, and some may be applicable here. Genocide and war crimes. You don't need a state actor. You can go against a private individual. The next push up was against corporations. Now, people I think have spoken about how it got down. What happened to our cases? Well, the Supreme Court cut back, and it cut back probably because we went from someone no one cared about to gradually more important, more powerful people. When we sued corporations, they said, "You're ruining capitalism." I tell you, that's what the Wall Street Journal said. We're destroying American capitalism. Well, from their mouth to someplace. But we knew we were taking a risk. And the fact that there were those cutbacks didn't mean it's the end. There are still cases under the Alien Tort Statute. There are still cases under the Torture Victim Protection Act. And there are cases that may be applicable here under the ATA, the Anti-Terrorism Act. I think what you need to do is to think about exploring every possibility. My first case with CCR was a products liability case, for goodness sakes. There's nothing about human rights law. It was about human rights. When we lost in the beginning in Unocal, in the case from Burma, we went to state court. And when we lost in state court on one theory of liability, we convinced the judge to give us a shot at the second theory of liability. And while we were trying that, the Ninth Circuit overturned the dismissal, and we were on again and in a position to sell. I urge you to consider working in this field. My life is better because I do this work. I have learned about all kinds of different people, about the incredible resilience of people who have suffered, and about the tremendous courage of people who stay and try to defend them. I thank you for the chance to talk to you and to meet you. And I will say, if you do this work, you will have a better life. Thank you.